Welcome back to my channel, where we dig through the history in your pocket to find the treasures that everyone else leaves behind. Today, we are going to talk about three specific quarters that you have probably held in your hand a dozen times. You might have used them to pay for parking, bought a soda with them, or simply tossed them into a jar without a second thought. But hidden among these millions of common coins are specific dates and specific errors that can change your financial situation overnight. We are going to break down the 1973 Washington quarter, the 1987 Washington quarter, and the 2001 Kentucky State quarter. Now, at first glance, these coins look completely ordinary. They are scratched, they are dull, and they look like they have been through a war zone of cash registers and vending machines. Most people assume that because a coin is dirty or worn, it is worthless. That is the single biggest mistake you can make in coin collecting. In fact, some of the most valuable errors ever discovered were found on coins that looked like absolute junk. The value is not always in the shine. The value is in the mistake. The value is in the rarity that hides in plain sight. In this video, I am going to show you exactly what to look for. We will go year by year, coin by coin. I will tell you the exact mint marks, the exact die cracks, and the exact weight anomalies that turn 25 cents into hundreds or even thousands of dollars. You need to watch until the very end because the final coin, the Kentucky State quarter, has a secret error that is so subtle, yet so valuable, that you will want to run to your piggy bank immediately. So, let's get started with the first coin on our list, a quarter from the 1970s that is famous for being overlooked. Let's begin with the 1973 Washington quarter. When you look at a 1973 quarter from circulation, it usually looks tired. The silver era ended in 1964, so by 1973, we were deep into the clad era. These coins are made of a copper-nickel sandwich, a layer of pure copper in the middle with layers of nickel and copper on the outside. Because of this composition, they don't age gracefully. They turn a dull, flat gray color. They get scratched easily. The eagle on the back often loses its feather detail, and Washington's hair becomes a smooth helmet of metal. If you found this coin on the sidewalk, you probably wouldn't even pick it up. It looks like just another quarter. But here is the hook. 1973 was a year of massive production, but it was also a year of massive quality control issues at the United States Mint. The Mint was trying to keep up with the demand of a growing economy, and when you rush production, mistakes happen. And in the world of numismatics, mistakes equal money. The first thing you need to look for on your 1973 quarter is the mint mark. You will find it on the front of the coin, to the right of Washington's ponytail. You might see a D for Denver or no mint mark at all, which means it was minted in Philadelphia. Now, a standard circulated 1973 quarter is worth exactly 25 cents. That is the boring reality. But we are not looking for the standard coin. We are looking for the anomalies. One of the most significant errors to look for on the 1973 quarter is the off-center strike. This happens when the planchet, the blank metal disc, does not feed perfectly into the striking chamber. The dies come down and strike the coin, but because it wasn't centered, part of the design is missing. You might see a crescent moon shape of blank metal on the side of the coin. If you find a 1973 quarter that is 10% or 20% off-center, but you can still see the full date, 1973, you have a winner. Even in dirty, circulated condition, an off-center 1973 quarter can sell for $20 to $50. If the off-center strike is more dramatic, say 50% off-center, the value climbs into the hundreds. But there is a more subtle error that is specific to this era, the misaligned die. This is different from an off-center strike. In a misaligned die error, only one side of the coin is off-center, while the other side is perfectly centered. This happens when the hammer die, the top die, is not aligned with the anvil die, the bottom die. Check the rim of your 1973 quarter. Does the rim look thicker on one side and thinner on the other? Does the lettering of Liberty or In God We Trust almost touch the edge of the coin? If so, you might have a misaligned die error. While minor misalignments are common, a severe misalignment where parts of the letters are cut off can bring a premium of $10 to $20. It's not a fortune, but it's a lot more than 25 cents. Now, let's talk about the heavy hitters. We need to talk about condition rarity. As I mentioned, 1973 quarters are usually ugly. Finding one that is pristine, I'm talking about a coin that looks like it was minted 5 minutes ago, is incredibly difficult. In the 1970s, people didn't save rolls of quarters like they did in the 50s or 60s. They spent them. As a result, the population of high-grade 1,973 quarters is shockingly low. If you have a 1973 quarter that still has its original mint luster, that cartwheel effect where the light spins around the coin, you need to get it graded. A 1973 quarter graded MS 67, mint state 67, is a rarity. There are very few in existence. These coins have sold at auction for over $3,000. Yes, you heard that right. A clad quarter, made of cheap metal, selling for the price of a used car simply because it survived in perfect condition. This is why you should never clean your coins. If you find a shiny 1973 quarter and you rub it with a cloth to make it look newer, you destroy those microscopic flow lines that create the luster. You turn a $3,000 coin into a face value coin in seconds. There is also a specific variety known as the 1973 DDO, or double die obverse. While it is not as dramatic as the famous 1955 penny, it is there if you look closely. You need a magnifying glass. Look at the letters of Liberty and the motto, "In God We Trust." On a double die, the letters will look thick and blocky. You might see a slight separation or a notch in the corners of the letters. This happens when the hub, the tool used to make the die, strikes the die multiple times but is slightly rotated between strikes. This creates a double image on the die, which is then transferred to every single coin that die strikes. A confirmed 1973 double die can sell for hundreds of dollars depending on the strength of the doubling. Another thing to check for on your 1973 quarter is the annealing error. Sometimes, the planchets were left in the annealing furnace for too long. This causes the copper to migrate to the surface, giving the coin a reddish or pinkish tone. Or, sometimes the nickel layer is missing entirely, and the coin looks like a copper penny but is the size of a quarter. A missing clad layer, 1973 quarter, is a major error. If you find a quarter that looks like it is made of pure copper, weigh it. A normal clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams. A quarter missing a clad layer will weigh significantly less, usually around 4.7 grams. If the weight is right and the look is right, you could be holding a coin worth $300 to $500. So, for the 1973 quarter, your checklist is simple. Look for the off-center strikes, check the rim for misaligned dies, hunt for that pristine mint luster, and weigh any coin that looks the wrong color. Do not let the dull gray appearance fool you. This coin is a sleeper, and collectors are waking up to its scarcity every day. Now, let's move forward in time to the next coin on our list, the 1987 Washington quarter. This coin comes from a decade that is often forgotten by collectors. The 1980s were a weird time for coinage. The mintages were high, but the quality was often terrible. The dies were overused, leading to coins with mushy details and flow lines that look like wrinkles. Washington's face often looks swollen or distorted on 1987 quarters because the dies were literally falling apart as they struck the coins. But here is the twist. 1987 is a semi-key date in high grades. Just like with the 1973, nobody was saving these. By 1987, the collecting boom of the mid-century had faded. People were using quarters to play arcade games and buy newspapers. They weren't putting them in albums. This means that finding a 1987 P, Philadelphia, or 1987 D, Denver, in true gem mint state condition is incredibly hard. Now let's talk about the P mint mark specifically. The 1987 P quarter is notorious for being struck with worn-out dies. If you look at the letters on the reverse, United States of America, they often look stretched out towards the rim. This is called die deterioration doubling. It is not a true double die, and it doesn't add much value, but it tells you the story of how hard the mint was working. However, if you can find a 1987 P where the letters are crisp, sharp, and separate from the rim, you have a better-than-average coin. The real money in 1987 quarters comes from Spitting Eagle varieties. Now, the famous Spitting Eagle is usually associated with the 1983 quarter, but die clashes happened in 1987 too. A die clash occurs when the hammer die and the anvil die smash together without a coin in between. This transfers the image of the reverse onto the obverse and vice versa. Sometimes, this leaves a crack or a line that looks like the eagle is spitting. Look closely at the beak of the eagle on the reverse. Do you see a raised line extending from the beak towards the wing or the rim? If you do, that is a die clash or a die crack. Collectors love these named errors. A 1987 quarter with a prominent die crack like this can sell for $20 to $40. It gives the coin character, but the biggest shock regarding the 1987 quarter is the broad strike. Because the mint was pumping out millions of these, the collar, the metal ring that holds the coin in place while it is struck, sometimes failed or got jammed. When a coin is struck without the collar, the metal spreads out like a pancake. It becomes larger in diameter than a normal quarter. A broad-struck 1987 quarter will look slightly bigger and thinner than a regular one. The design will often distort near the edges. If you find a coin that doesn't fit into a standard coin wrapper or feels too wide in your hand, check the date. A 1987 broad strike is a major error. These can fetch anywhere from $50 to $100. And let's not forget the struck through grease error. This is very common in the late 80s. Sometimes, grease and debris from the machinery would get clogged in the die. When the die struck the coin, the grease filled in the letters or numbers, resulting in a coin where parts of the design are missing or very faint. You might find a 1987 quarter where the 19 is visible but the 87 is almost gone, or where the word Liberty is half missing. A lot of people think these are just worn down, but if the rim is sharp and the rest of the coin has detail, it is likely a struck through grease error. While minor grease strikes are only worth a few dollars, a dramatic one, where almost half the design is obliterated, can be worth $20 or more. It is a cool conversation piece that proves the industrial nature of coin making. Now, I want to talk about the high-end market again because this is where the 1987 quarter really shines. The population reports for 1,987 quarters are fascinating. In grades of MS 63 or MS 64, they are common. You can buy them for a few bucks. But the moment you hit MS 66, the supply dries up. And in MS 67, they are virtually non-existent. A 1987 P. Washington quarter graded MS 67 is a unicorn. It is a coin that shouldn't exist because of how bad the quality control was. If you submit a 1987 quarter to PCGS or NGC and it comes back MS 67, you are looking at a coin worth upwards of $4,000. Think about that for a second. For $1,000 for a quarter from the year The Simpsons first appeared on TV. It's not ancient history. It's recent history. And that is why it is so exciting. You might have a 1987 quarter sitting in a jar right now that was pulled from a fresh roll back in the day and never touched. If it has that blinding white luster and 0 scratches on Washington's cheek, you need to protect it. Do not toss it back in the jar. Put it in a holder. Also, keep an eye out for the 1987 D. The Denver Mint usually produced better strikes than Philadelphia, but they had their own issues. One specific error to look for on the 1987 D is the RPM or repunched mint mark. While not as common as in the older days, there are still varieties where the D was punched, then corrected. Look for a thickening of the vertical bar of the D or a secondary curve inside the D. These varieties are still being discovered. You could be the one to find a new variety that gets listed in the errorbooks.so. For the 1987 quarter, the strategy is this. Look for the weird shapes. Look for coins that are too wide, broad strikes, coins with missing letters, grease strikes, and coins with cracks near the eagle, die cracks. And above all, look for perfection. If you find a 1987 quarter that looks brand new, treat it like gold, because to a collector, it might as well be. And finally, we arrive at the coin that everyone has seen, the coin that launched a million collections. The 2001 Kentucky State Quarter. The State Quarter program was one of the most successful numismatic programs in history. It got everyone looking at their change. But because billions of these were made, most people think they are worthless. They think, oh, it's just a Kentucky quarter, I have 10 of them. And that complacency is exactly what we are going to exploit today. The Kentucky quarter features the My Old Kentucky Home design, showing the Federal Hill Mansion and a thoroughbred racehorse behind a fence. It is a classic design, but hidden within that design are specific errors that can be worth hundreds of dollars. The first and most famous error you need to look for is the Godsbird, or the cracked horse. This is a die crack error. A die crack occurs when the metal die used to stamp the coin begins to crack under the immense pressure. The crack in the die fills with metal during the strike, creating a raised, jagged line on the surface of the coin. On the Kentucky quarter, there is a known variety where a die crack forms near the horse or near the mansion. Sometimes, these cracks can look like extra details, but the real money in state quarters, and specifically the 2001 Kentucky, comes from rotated dies. This is a very cool error to check for. Hold your Kentucky quarter by the edges, with Washington's head upright. Now, flip the coin over vertically, top to bottom. The image of the mansion and horse should be upright. If you flip it and the mansion is sideways, or upside down, or tilted at a 45-degree angle, you have a rotated die error. This happens when the dies spin in the press and are not locked in the correct orientation. A significant rotation, say 90 degrees or 180 degrees, is a major error. These coins can sell for $50 to $100. It is the easiest error to check for. You don't need a microscope, you just need to flip the coin. Check every single Kentucky quarter you find. You will be surprised how many minor rotations exist, but you are hunting for the big ones. Now, let's talk about the missing clad layer again. I mentioned this with the 1973 quarter, but it is actually more common on state quarters. The quality control during the state quarter rush was intense. Sometimes, the nickel layer on one side of the strip would peel off before the blanks were even cut. This results in a coin that is copper on one side and nickel on the other. A 2001 Kentucky quarter that is copper red on the reverse, the mansion side, but normal on the obverse, Washington side, is a stunning error. It looks like a two-tone coin. These are highly desirable. A missing clad layer Kentucky quarter can fetch anywhere from $200 to $600 depending on the condition. The visual appeal is undeniable. If you see a red quarter, don't assume it was painted or rusted. Weigh it. If it's light, around 4.7 grams, you have hit the jackpot. There is another specific error on the Kentucky quarter involving the lettering. Look at the words, "My Old Kentucky Home." Sometimes, due to a grease-filled die, the word old or home might be completely missing. You might have a coin that just says, "My Kentucky." These missing word errors are fun. They aren't worth thousands, but they can easily sell for $10 to $20 on eBay. It's a quick flip for a coin you found for 25 cents. But here is the million coin secret for the Kentucky quarter. We need to talk about the double die reverse. While not as massive as some other state quarters, there are reports of minor doubling on the fence rails and the windows of the mansion on the Kentucky quarter. You need to look very closely at the fence in the foreground. On a normal coin, the rails are singular and sharp. On a doubled die, the rails will look thick, or you might see a split line where the rail was stamped twice. The windows of the mansion are another focal point. If the window panes look messy or doubled, you might have a DDO. These varieties are still being discovered and attributed. The state quarter series is still relatively young in numismatic terms, which means there are still discoveries to be made. You could find a new variety that no one has documented yet, and we cannot ignore the off-metal errors. This is the holy grail for state quarters. Occasionally, a planchet intended for a foreign coin or a different denomination, like a nickel or a dime stock, gets mixed into the quarter line. A Kentucky quarter struck on a nickel planchet would be smaller and have part of the design cut off. A Kentucky quarter struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet, gold-colored, would be a massive discovery worth thousands. While these are extremely rare, they do exist. Always look at the color and feel the weight of the coin. If it feels wrong, it probably is, and in a good way. Finally, let's talk about high grades for the 2001 Kentucky. Because everyone saved state quarters, MS 65 and MS 66 examples are everywhere. They are worth very little. However, the 2001 Kentucky quarter is known for having a weak strike in the center of the design. The details of the horse and the fence are often mushy. Finding a Kentucky quarter with a full strike, where the horse is perfectly defined and the mansion has crisp architectural details, is surprisingly hard. And finding one in MS 68, that is the money zone. An MS 68 Kentucky quarter is a conditionally rare coin that can sell for hundreds of dollars to registry set collectors who need the absolute best example for their collection. So, when you look at your 2001 Kentucky quarters, don't just look at the state name. Flip them to check for rotation. Check the color to see if a layer is missing. Look at the fence for doubling. And check the strike to see if you have a perfect gem. To summarize, We have looked at three very different coins today, but they all share one thing in common. They are hiding in plain sight. The 1973 Washington quarter is a sleeper from the clad era. You are looking for off-center strikes, misaligned dies, and that elusive MS-67 grade that sells for thousands. You are checking for the reddish color of a missing clad layer and the thickness of a doubled die. The 1987 Washington quarter is a forgotten treasure from the 80s. You are hunting for this spitting eagle die clashes, the broad strikes that look too big for the wrapper, and the grease strikes that are missing letters. You are looking for that impossible MS-67 condition that proves quality control was just a suggestion back then. And the 2001 Kentucky State quarter is the modern marvel. You are flipping every single one to check for rotated dies. You are weighing the red ones to find missing clad layers. You are inspecting the fence rails for doubling and the windows for extra thickness. The beautiful thing about coin collecting is that the treasure hunt never ends. Every time you get change at the grocery store, every time you break a dollar bill, you have a lottery ticket in your hand. Most people scratch the ticket and throw it away without looking. But you know better. You know that a scratch on a coin might be a die crack worth $50. You know that a dull color might be a missing layer worth $500. You know that the date 1973, 1987, or 2001 is a signal to stop and look. So, here is your homework. Go find your coin jar. Go through your car's console. Dump out your piggy bank. Sort your quarters by date. Look for these 3 years. Get a magnifying glass and a good light. And start hunting. It might take time. You might look through 1,000 quarters and find nothing. But then, one day, you will spot that rotated die. You will spot that off-center strike. And that feeling of discovery, that rush of finding value where others saw nothing, is worth more than the money itself. But speaking of money, wouldn't it be nice to turn 25 cents into $1,000? It happens more often than you think. It happens to people who watch this channel and learn what to look for. If you enjoyed this deep dive into these 3 specific quarters, and if you want to learn about other denominations like dimes, nickels, and pennies that are hiding secrets, make sure you hit that subscribe button on Million Coins. We are dedicated to making you the smartest collector in the room. We want you to find the treasure. We want you to make the profit. Leave a comment below and let me know if you have ever found a major error in your pocket change. Have you ever found a Kentucky quarter with a rotated die? Have you ever seen a 1973 quarter that looked brand new? I want to hear your stories. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your magnifier handy, and never, ever underestimate the value of a dirty, old coin. Happy hunting, and I'll see you in the next video.